My clock is saying 7 o'clock, so I'm going to call a meeting to order for February 21st. And welcome everybody here to our regular council meeting in person and virtually. And first thing on our agenda, of course, is to adopt our agenda. And I have a recommendation that the agenda for the February 21st, 2023 regular meeting of council be accepted and passed. Are you going to move her and a seconder for that? Moved by Councillor Burke, seconded by Councillor McCabe. All those in favor? That's carried. Thank you. We'll go through the disclosure of pecuniary interest. Does anybody have anything to declare with regard to anything on today's agenda? I have none. Councillor Burke? No. Councillor McCabe?
I have none.
Councillor Rankin?
None.
And Councillor Hearn?
None.
Okay, thank you. Next up, we have our county council update, and welcome to joining us in person tonight, Councillor Cork. The floor is yours.
Speak into the mic, okay?
Okay. It is really nice to be here because, Zoom is seductive, but it really isn't in person. So I don't get here often enough, but well, I see a small step for mankind. Yeah. So thank you so much for this opportunity to bring you a little bit of county news. And I have distributed these little pictures of what I guess you've gathered by now is the new Arthur County Works Garage. And we're getting really very close to this project getting underway. They're hoping to have the tenders out by the end of the month and work starting by this May and completed by a year from May. And I hope if you see me getting off the track, Mayor, that you'll put me back on the track. So it was at last week's roads committee, after hearing a presentation from the architect, that it was approved that we go to tender. And but it will be this Thursday before it gets official. And if approved, the garage that's budgeted for just over $7 million will start construction. So as you can see from this, it is a single story. And what you can't see is that over around the other side are where the bay doors are. There's 6 service bays and 1 wash bay around there. And they're all big enough to accommodate plow trucks or graders, which makes them pretty large. There was some discussion at the committee meeting that these service bay doors might, which are generally facing the north, some thought that perhaps the doors should be facing south to take advantage of the prevailing winds and as well as the sun. And so there's some possibility there might be a change in that before Thursday. We'll see on Thursday. One feature of any works garage is a salt and sand dome, and this will not be present in this one. The large, this is actually a salt and sand rectangle. It's going to be concrete on the first 10 feet or so. And beyond that, the interior will be covered with 2 layers of inch-thick plywood that will be separated by a membrane that will prevent the salt from getting through to the steel siding. Another interesting feature of this structure is that it uses entirely engineered wooden beams instead of steel, which they tell us in case of fire, the wooden beams do not burn right through. They rather char on the outside and kind of smother out the fire from further burning. And the result is that much of the interior of still structurally sound wood is left intact, and as opposed to the steel that tends to, in a very hot fire, melt and sag. Apparently the wood has less tendency to do that. This little front portion of the building is offices, storage, lunchroom, lockers, showers, and a few other little things. And what's interesting is what you cannot see, but underneath that building is a very large cistern that will be catching all the rain runoff from the roof. And as you can see, there's a fair bit of roof there. So the runoff is expected to be quite substantial. And not being on municipal water, this cistern water will be used for firefighting and truck washing and any other non-potable uses. I can't remember, was it going to flush the toilets? Good, here's another use. The building is designed to be able to become a net zero energy user in the future. The design includes readiness to accommodate solar panels. As it is, the building will be heated and cooled by geothermal heat pumps. Trees will be planted all around the circumference of the property. All in all, it really is quite an interesting building, and I think it'll be good for the county to have such a building. The architect did mention that the windows in this building will be openable, but also told us that they may not be opened all that often if the wind is prevailing from Alltree Farms across the road. And the garage is being situated it's on a 10-acre property, but it's being situated so that the property will be able to accommodate possibly in the future an ambulance garage. And now ambulance garages were more certain some years in the past. At the moment, they're all under provincial review, so it's not quite so clear what exactly is happening with garages, or ambulance garages. So we won't be holding our breath on that one. So I think that's my report on the county garage. I'm on for questions.
Thanks, Campbell. Any questions from
Sure.
Councilor McCabe? Go ahead.
Thanks for this, Campbell. So that 7 million, does that include the cost of the land?
Maybe. Sorry, I think it does.
And then my follow-up would be, what was the actual cost for that land? Either one of you guys know?
Please.
I'm not sure that I can answer that. I'd have to go look it up specifically. I haven't got that at my
I
fingertips.
did get it, but I'm not going to say it because at the very moment, I'm jumping between about 3 figures that start with a 4, and I'm just not, sorry.
No, it's all right.
Yeah, I don't have anything else to add to that
Okay.
at this point. Other
that-
questions?
Yep. So then does that account for like the hydro, the septic and the wastewater hookups and everything?
Yep.
Okay.
Unless they happen to move the building further to the rear of the property, in which case they did say that the hydro there'll be a little extra for that. Okay,
Thank you.
thank you.
Councilor Burke?
Oh, I'm sorry.
I have a question. So my question is once the new county garage is completed, what is the proposed use for the old site?
Well, you guys are full of tough questions. I imagine they'll try to sell it off, but that's only a guess. Andy, do you have?
No decisions have been made yet in regard to that location. There's some concern that there may be some environmental remediation required for that site to get additional uses, but no study work has been done to verify that at this stage.
Thanks.
If you're interested in buying it, it probably will be available. Any other questions for Campbell? Okay,
Thank you.
Thanks, Campbell. Okay, next up, we have a presentation. I see Phil Baird at the back. Welcome, Phil. Give us a little update on the Maitland Valley Conservation Authority.
Thank you. And I'll just echo Campbell's comments. It's good to be back in person. I've had enough Zoom meetings over the last 3 years to last me a lifetime. Anyway, Karen's going to help me with the slides. So good evening, Mayor Lennox, members of council. Unfortunately, Ed Ponowitz can't make it tonight. He was in an accident last week and is going to be out of commission for quite a while, unfortunately. So I'll go through the major activities that we're doing in 2023, give you a brief overview of our draft 2023 budget, because I recognize that you received a more detailed package back in January. Can I have the next slide, please? So our vision statement is working for a healthy environment. Our members developed that mission statement back in 2010, and it's still relevant. Our members recognize that we need a healthy environment in order to have a healthy economy. Next slide, please. And our mission has not changed either, providing leadership to restore water, forests, and soil. The health and resilience of our forests, water, and soil are the foundation of our economy, but also our life support system. Next slide, please. And back in 2014, we set out the following priorities that we're continuing to focus on, and that's helping our member municipalities reduce the potential for loss of life, property damage, and social disruption from flooding and erosion. Helping our member municipalities and landowners to develop soil and water conservation systems to keep soil and nutrients on the land and out of water courses. Ensuring that our conservation areas set a good example of stewardship and are safe for the public to use. And last but not least is developing a stable financial base so that we can assist our member municipalities to develop a healthy, resilient, and prosperous watershed. Next slide, please. So the Ministry of Natural Resources requires all conservation authorities to prepare the following plans and strategies by December 31st, 2024. A watershed resource management strategy, a conservation area land inventorying strategy. That includes a component that we're to identify any lands that could be used for housing. An asset management plan for our flood and erosion control infrastructure, and ice management plans where we have ice jamming problems. So we're going to be starting work on all these plans and strategies in 2023 because it's going to take us a couple of years to get all that work done. And the Ministry of Natural Resources also requires all conservation authorities to have an agreement in place with all their member municipalities for services and programs that they will provide and that their member municipalities will support by January the 1st, 2024. So MBCA has an agreement in place with all its member municipalities except for Wellington North. And we understand that you're waiting to see the agreements or the draft agreements from the Grand and the Saugeen so that you can look at all three together before you make a decision on whether to sign or not. So the only non-mandatory service that MBCA has included in our agreement is watershed stewardship and watershed health monitoring. So that's the only non-mandatory service that we have. Next slide, please. So some of the other things we're going to be working on in 2023, and that's getting rid of some of our surplus infrastructure and property. We'll be removing the Nature Center barn at the Wawanosh Conservation Area located southwest of Wingham. That's the bottom structure in your picture there. We're in the process of selling the Brussels Mill to the Brussels Trust. And we're working with the municipality of North Perth to determine if they're willing to lease the Galbraith Conservation Area, which is located near Milverton. Next slide, please. Oh, there should be one other slide. Anyway, we also have 2 recreational dams in Brussels and Bluevale that we've decided will be decommissioned at the end of their lifespan. However, we're working out an agreement with the 2 municipalities where those structures are located, that if they would like to keep them, then we're happy to let them pay for it because there aren't grants for rebuilding dams. So we can get grants to decommission, but not for rebuilding, and they are recreational structure. Yes, number 8, the forest health assessment. So we're working with the counties of Huron, Perth, Wellington, and Bruce County and woodlot owners to assess the health of forests across the watershed. We're planning to finish that assessment in 2023. Some of the preliminary findings include that our forests are being impacted by invasive insects. The emerald ash borer is on its way. It's not, I don't think it's up into this area as much as it is down by the lakeshore. Disease and removal. Diversity in our forest is declining. The most prominent tree behind maples that we're finding in our forests is dead trees. And most of those are ash, and ash makes up 30 to 35% of our forest. But beech and butternut, are also being impacted. Between 2015 and 2020, we've also lost 500 acres of forested lands across the watershed, with the majority of that loss occurring in the North Maitland watershed, so in the Wellington County portion. We're not sure why that is, but we have lost probably 30 to 40% of that 500 acres in the Wellington portion, or the North Maitland. Next slide, please. At MVCA, we're also working with landowners in our stewardship programs to implement 3 key practices. And to have healthy and resilient forests and rivers, we need to restore natural areas in floodplains, river valleys, riparian areas, and wetlands. To have healthy and productive agricultural land, we need to adopt conservation systems such as cover crops and stormwater management systems to help keep soil and nutrients on the land and out of water courses. And Maitland Valley works with the Saugeen and the Grand to help deliver the Wellington Clean Water Project. And in 2022, there were 2 projects in Wellington North, a windbreak project and a well decommissioning project. Next slide, please. So in terms of our operating budget, the drivers of the increase in our levy are one is the phase in of salary and benefits review that we conducted. The changes to salary and benefits will be phased in over 5 years. Cost of living increase for 2023 was capped at 3%, and we do it as a defined amount so that everybody gets the same amount. If you do it by percentages, the people at the top just get further ahead from the people at the bottom. Projected increases in insurance costs. Insurance continues to go up and up and up. And we've also have increases, in demand and need for services, especially related to the increase in development and maintenance of our 28 conservation areas. Over the last 3 years, use of our conservation areas has just skyrocketed. People have discovered nature again and packed our campground and our day use areas, which is good. Next slide, please. Our draft budget for 2023 is 4.1 million, which is down from last year's. We don't have as many capital projects this year as we did last year. The levy increase we're looking at is $89,777, which equates to about a 4.9% increase. And Wellington North's increase would be $2,243 in 2023. Next slide, please. So MVCA's members will be reviewing comments and feedback on the draft work plan and budget on March 15th. And we would appreciate your feedback on the draft work plan and budget. So with that, I'll open it up to your feedback that you may have on what I've presented or anything in the package.
Thanks for that, Phil. So the increase is $2,243. So what would that bring the total amount for Wellington North in 1 year?
It's in the back of my package here. Just let me.
Sure.
It would bring it to $51,124.
All right, thank you. Then can
Go ahead.
you mentioned about the 500 acres that are up. Did you say near Wellington County?
Well, that's across the whole watershed, but 30 to 40% of that were in the North Maitland watershed. So that's basically from Harrison up.
All right, and is there any reason for that? Or I know you said you weren't 100% sure, but
Well, it's land that's been removed out of forest for agriculture, but the reasons why that happened were, I don't know all the details behind that. That's just when we got our new air photography in 2021, we analyzed the forested areas we had in 2015 to 2020 and looked at where the changes were. And that's where we noticed a larger amount of change than in other areas. But with the pressure we're seeing on our forests right now, with the ash borer going through, there's whole sections of forests that are basically dead. And once you remove them, then they're not even covered by the tree cutting bylaws anymore because there's not enough diameter or trees of the right size to stay. So we're going to have to work with the counties to see how we can improve or change forestry management practices so that we can increase forest cover and not lose forest cover.
Any other questions for Phil? I just have one, Phil, and that I probably should know the answer, but what you talked about stewardship programs and the rural water quality program. And I know that the Grand River Conservation Authority is the lead on that. So if obviously we want to see Maitland Valley continue to help deliver that service, is your agreement then with GRCA to carry that part out of it, or how do you deal with that?
No, because the general stewardship services are covered by the levy. So we have staff that work to provide forestry services and soil and water conservation services. So they're covered by the levy. We don't get any delivery funding from Wellington County to deliver Wellington County clean water project. So we have to have staff and pay them in order they can deliver that. So
that's covered by the general levy. It's not.
That's correct. Yeah,
In those non-mandatory programs.
that's correct. Yeah,
Okay.
which it has been all along. It's just that the province in their wisdom hasn't deemed to consider stewardship a mandatory service, even though that's the reason conservation authorities were founded back in the 1950s. So
Okay, no, I just was thinking that this could get complex from an agreement perspective if we got county level providing the money and the local municipalities providing the levy dollars. And then you have multiple, well, in Wellington North's case, three conservation authorities. But countywide, I think there's 7.
that's right.
So I could just see this getting a little complicated.
Well, as long as all our member municipalities support us staying in stewardship, it's business as usual. It's just if some are in and some are out, that's when it starts to get complicated. And because apparently we're not supposed to deliver any services outside of our jurisdictional boundary either. So, we can't help other conservation authorities out. Like right now, Saugeen does some of the tree planting work for us because they have the machinery. It just makes sense to do that. So those are some things we need to try and find ways to work with.
Okay. Thank you for that.
Thank you.
Any other questions for Phil? Thanks again, Phil,
Thank
for
you.
coming and sharing that information with us.
Okay, I'm off to Mitchell now, so. Yep.
Okay. Next, we have we need to recess to move into the public meeting for a planning matter. So I have a recommendation here that the Council of the Corporation of the Township of Wellington North recess the February 21st, 2023 regular meeting of council for the purpose of holding a public meeting under the Planning Act for 2786713 Ontario Inc. VED Homes zoning bylaw amendment. Could I get a mover and a seconder for that? Moved by Councillor Hearn, seconded by Councillor Rankin. All those in favor? That's carried. So we're recessed from our regular council meeting. I'll move over to our public meeting agenda, and I'll call the public meeting for February 21st to order and ask if there's any disclosure of pecuniary interest in regard to this application ZBA 27-22. Councillor Rankin?
None.
Councillor Hearn?
No.
I have none. Councillor McCabe?
I have none.
And Councillor Burke?
No.
Okay, thank you. The location of the subject land. So the land subject to the proposed zoning amendment and draft plan of subdivision is legally described as part of Park Lot 3, south of Domville Street. And the subject property has a total area of 0.984 hectares. The purpose and effect of the application. So the purpose and effect of the proposed zoning bylaw amendment will rezone the lands from residential R1C zone to site-specific holding residential HR 3-35 and site-specific holding residential H 3-36. The amendment is required in order to facilitate the proposed draft plan of subdivision 23T-22006. How was notice given for this public meeting?
Notices were mailed to property owners within 120 meters of the subject property and as well as to the applicable agencies. Signage was posted on the property on January 20th.
Okay, we got a couple of presentations. We got Matthew Dow from the County of Wellington with his planning report for tonight. Welcome, Matthew.
Perfect. Thank you and good evening to council members of the public and through you, Chair. Before you today is a zoning bylaw amendment seeking to rezone the subject lands from R1C to holding site specific residential. So in short, it would be HR 3-35, 36 and 37 would be the site specifics. The purpose of this meeting today is to go over the proposal and allow the public as well as council an opportunity to express any comments or concerns, ask questions, and seek additional information from the developer and their consultants. So to provide a quick overview of the subject lands, they are currently vacant, 2.43 acres in size in Arthur. The applicant is proposing 20 cluster townhouses as well as 15 street townhouses. In addition, a draft plan of subdivision was also submitted to the county, accompanied by an array of studies which can be reviewed on the county's website. The draft plan has been circulated to agencies and is awaiting comments. And on the policy side of things, the subject lands are designated residential in the county official plan and currently zoned R1C in the Wellington North zoning bylaw. Provincial policy seeks to promote growth in settlement areas, which includes a mix of housing types. The subject lands are also located in stage 1 of the Wellington North Community Growth Plan and would contribute to the recommended 30 to 40% intensification targets recommended for Arthur. Planning staff note the proposal is consistent with the county official plan density targets. And lastly, I would note the proposal is subject to site plan approval, where some of the details around buffering and fencing, amenity areas and grading will be looked at in further detail. So in terms of next steps, following the public meeting, planning staff will finalize the review as well of the proposed rezoning and consider the public comments as well as council's comments. We will report back to council at a later date with the proposed revisions based on tonight's discussion and seek council's consideration on a draft zoning bylaw. So with that said, I know the applicant, their planning consultant is in attendance, and I know they prepared a short presentation, so I'll leave it at that. Thanks.
Thanks, Matthew. Next, we have Scott Patterson to speak on behalf of the applicant, I believe. So welcome, Scott. And whenever you're ready, the floor is yours.
Good evening, Mayor Lennox, council, staff, and the public. I just received an email from Ms. Wallace that she can't find my presentation. So I think I'm going to try and share screen from my end. Is that correct?
You can do that, or you can email it to me and I can do that, but it's probably faster if you can share your screen.
Okay. Let's see if I can do that.
Perfect.
Okay. So trusting everyone can see that. So yeah, good evening. Again, my name is Scott Patterson. I'm with Patterson Planning Consultants, and I'm here tonight representing 278-6713 Ontario Inc., operating as VED Homes. So as noted, the subject property is currently vacant. It's 2.43 acres in size, and it's located immediately east of the Cache Residential Development Project at the terminus of Adelaide Street, just west of Conestoga Street North. So the subject property is outlined in red. Just for context, you can see the surrounding developed area consisting of single detached houses, walk-up apartments, semis, and some street fronting towns as well. The outline of the Cache development is on the left-hand side of your screen to the west. You can see the extension or proposed extension of Adelaide Street to our project limits. And then again, on the east side or the right side of the screen, you can see the Adelaide Street, existing Adelaide Street that needs to be extended further. So the connection of that roadway through our property is proposed through our development. Again, as noted, a draft plan of subdivision application has been filed with the County of Wellington to divide the property into 4 blocks for residential land use and to recognize the completion of Adelaide Street from the Cache project through to Conestoga Street North. The draft plan has been assigned file number 23T-22006, and the application is currently under review. So for your reference, this is the draft plan that's currently before the county. No public meetings are required for draft plan of subdivision applications, but naturally it needs to be reviewed as part of this project. So for context, Cache is to the top of the screen and Conestoga Street is to the bottom of the screen. So you can see on the right side, the 2 street fronting townhouse blocks, which will each contain 5 units. In the center of the screen is block 3, which again would contain street fronting townhouse units, another block of 5. And then block 4, which is the cluster townhouse block, the larger block on the left-hand side of the screen. And of course, the Adelaide Street extension going through the property, which is really the defining factor in this development because it has 2 fixed points, being where the Cache development project abuts us on the west and the extension going through to the existing Adelaide Street on the east. So concurrently with the draft plan application, we submitted a zoning bylaw amendment application, which is discussion for tonight. And that is to change the zoning of the property from the R1C zone to site-specific versions of the R3 zoning. A total of 35 units are proposed in the form of 15 street fronting townhouses and 20 cluster townhouses. And all the townhouses are proposed to be 2-story. So this is the concept site plan, the layout that was submitted with our applications. Again, Cache being at the top of the screen and Conestoga Street North being at the bottom. You can see the street fronting townhouses on the right side, fronting onto Adelaide Street. The middle block, block 3, which is another block of street fronting townhouses in the middle of the screen, at the bottom, again facing onto Adelaide Street, and the proposed cluster townhouse development with 20 units in the remainder of the property.
Scott, sorry to interrupt you, but just wonder, we've been seeing the same slide throughout your presentation. Was that your intent?
No, I have multiple slides. Maybe I should email it to Ms. Wallace if you could just bear with me for half a second.
Sure.
And that's been sent. I love technology when it works.
Let's try this. Go ahead. Can you see that, Scott?
Yes, I can. I'm not sure where to start and stop now. Next slide, please, I guess. Yeah, so I guess we can start here and I'll go as quickly as I can, so not to take too much time for council, but this is just the context image that I provided, illustrating the location of the property, the Cache development to the west, the current Adelaide Street extension through their property, and the Adelaide Street existing roadway portion on the right side of your screen that would extend through our property to connect the two current portions of that road. And the surrounding land area is dominated by single detached dwellings, walk-up apartments, semi-detached, and some street fronting towns. Next slide, please. Again, as noted, we've submitted the draft plan of subdivision application to create the 4 blocks on the site. Next slide, please. And this was the draft plan that I was referencing before, showing the 2 blocks on the right-hand side of the screen for street fronting townhouses. The block in the middle being, again, street fronting townhouses, all fronting onto Adelaide Street. And then block 4 being the cluster townhouses, the larger block on the left-hand side of the screen. Cache being to the top and Conestoga Street being to the bottom. Next slide, please. And again, we've submitted our zoning bylaw amendment application to support the proposal for the 35 units being 15 street fronting townhouses and the 20 cluster townhouses. Next slide. This is the illustration of the proposed development plan that I referenced. Cache is to the top again, Conestoga Street to the bottom. The 10 street fronting townhouses on the right-hand side fronting onto Adelaide Street. The 5 units in the middle at the bottom, again, street fronting onto Adelaide Street. And the 20-unit cluster project with the remainder of the land on the left-hand side of the screen. Next slide, please. So this is just the example elevations, the front elevations of the buildings that we submitted. All units are proposed to be 2-story, each having their own independent garage. Next slide, please. And the concept rear elevation for all of the townhouse buildings. Next slide. The left side elevation for reference. And the right side elevation, noting that we're not having windows or proposing windows on any of the side elevations. Next slide, please. And again, for context, this is the overall development plan in relation to the overall area, showing the Adelaide Street extension through the property with the street fronting townhouses to the top, street fronting townhouses in the middle, and then the remnant lands or the rest of the property being used for the cluster townhouse development. Next slide. So when it comes to the zoning bylaw amendment that we're seeking, this is a visual illustration just looking at all of the street fronting towns. Naturally, the things in green are good. Things in red are where we're deviating from the typical R3 zoning. So for all of the blocks, we're seeking a reduction in the minimum lot area, the required being 232 square meters, and we're going down to at minimum 161.7. Requesting a minimum lot frontage change. The zoning requires 6.5 meters, and we're asking 5.79 meters across the board for all the street fronting townhouses. And 5.79 meters is 19 feet, so they're 19-foot wide townhouses. And a front yard minimum reduction strictly for block 3, as well as a rear yard minimum reduction. It's really minimal. 7.6 meters is required by the zoning, and we're requesting 7.5 meters. Next slide, please. And again, a visual illustration, red being what we're asking is a deviation, green being good if you were considering the normal R3 zoning requirements for a cluster townhouse. We're seeking a reduction in the overall lot area based on the resulting lot area we have on the site. A reduction in the front yard minimum, 4.5 meters where 6 is normally required. And a rear yard setback reduction from 7.6 meters down to 6. And I'll illustrate these on the next few slides. Next slide, please. So again, for block one, being a street fronting townhouse block, two deviations from the normal R3 zoning, being the reduction in lot area from 232 down to 227 per lot or per unit, and a reduction in the lot frontage from 6.5 meters down to 5.79 meters. All of the rest of the zoning we would comply with under typical R3 situation. Next slide, please. And again, the same for block two, reduction in lot area and lot frontage, and complying with all of the rest of the zoning. Next slide, please. For block three, it's a more significant reduction in the lot area from 232 down to 161. The request for lot frontage stays the same at 5.79 meters. We are requesting a reduction in the front yard setback down to 3.7 meters, and that's to the porch. The garage area would remain at 6 meters. And a modest rear yard reduction from 7.6 meters down to 7.5 meters. Next slide, please. And then for the overall cluster townhouse, again, the overall reduction in lot area, considering what would be existing through the draft plan. A reduction in the front yard minimum down to 4.5 meters. On the image, that would be to the top right, where the last townhouse unit in the row abuts the Adelaide Street extension. A rear yard minimum reduction from 7.6 down to 6 meters. And that would be on the left-hand side of your screen, where the unit's back onto what we considered the rear yard through the zoning. And just for reference, the cluster townhouse block has 10 surface additional parking spaces, in addition to the driveway parking and the garage parking. It has roughly a 1,700 square foot amenity area, a central garbage facility, a single entrance out to Adelaide Street, and we're proposing a sidewalk connection into the site and through the property. Next slide, please. As noted, we've submitted multiple supporting materials for the application, primarily in support of the draft plan, but also in support of the zoning, including archaeological, functional servicing report, stormwater management, civil engineering, geotechnical, scoped hydrogeological, phase one, and the traffic impact study, all of which are currently with township and county staff for review. Next slide, please. The proposal is consistent with the provincial policy statement, conforms to the growth plan, conforms to the County of Wellington official plan. The site-specific permissions that we're seeking would allow the 15 street fronting townhouses and 20 cluster townhouses to be developed. It facilitates the completion of the Adelaide Street roadway, and site plan approval will be required for the 20-unit cluster townhouse block. Next slide, please. And just for council's reference, the Cache development also included street fronting townhouses, and the site-specific zoning for those units was also sought and was passed as the R3-29 zone. And for reference, you can see that Cache requested a minimum lot area of 167 square meters. We're requesting 227 for each of block one and block two, and then block three, we're down to 161. For Cache, they requested a minimum lot frontage of 6.1. We're at 5.79, so roughly a foot smaller. They requested a 5-meter front yard, and again for block three, we're requesting 3.7. But for block one and two, we're above 6 meters. And then the rear yard setback, Cache requested 6 meters. We're requesting the reduction from 7.6 down to 7.5. Next slide, please. So again, yeah, the proposal would see the development of a currently vacant site and the completion of the Adelaide Street roadway. The site-specific zoning will direct the form of development and implement the project. And we look forward to working with township and county staff and to the public feedback and comments that we will receive this evening, and any questions from council. I would note that staff have provided me the written comments that have been submitted to date. Those have been circulated out to our development team for review and comment. So we are aware of those and we're working on those. And I'll keep the county planner and all staff apprised of trying to resolve those issues and answer those questions. But any questions from council or staff, I'd be happy to answer them at this time.
Okay, we'll maybe come back to you with those questions. Sorry. Scott, we'll maybe just hold off on the questions for a little bit, but we'll reserve the right to come back to you on those. Has any further correspondence been received in respect to this application?
Yes, email after the agenda package was put together from Mike Linesman. He does have comments in the package. He added further to his concerns that are already in the package. He's concerned about increased traffic and noise pollution. And we received from Tracy Swift today. Now she's going to speak. So I'll just really summarize. Well, actually, Tracy, I know that you're going to speak, so I'll let you speak to the concerns that you've submitted. She did submit a diagram, and we'll circulate that. Everybody just showing some ponding in her backyard. And that's all.
Okay.
George and Linda White are registered to speak via Zoom, but I don't see them in the waiting room. Tracy Swift was also registered to speak via Zoom.
Okay. Thank you. So the bylaw with respect to this application will be considered at a future council meeting, no decision will be made this evening. Any persons wishing notice of the passing of the bylaw must submit a written request. And with that, I will open the floor to any questions or comments from the public. Now I see we have Tracy. Do we have anybody else from the public online with us?
No.
So Tracy, if you can hear me,
Yep.
I'll give you the floor and let you go ahead.
Thank you for the opportunity tonight to present my concerns. Our biggest concern, I am speaking on behalf of my property, which is 303 Donville, and my neighbor, the Vanderveens, which are 305 Donville. And it's in regards to the existing ponding of water in our backyard that happens every year, every spring, every time we get a heavy rain. As soon as the ground gets saturated, our backyard ponds. We have both done some mitigation measures to keep the water out of our house because it does tend to actually leak into our crawl spaces in our basement quite readily. And we've done everything we can to this point to minimize water coming into our house. Our sites appear to be naturally draining, like overland flow through the field to the south. And there currently is a retaining wall that is planned on this development that I think will negatively impact the drainage of our backyard. The picture that I submitted that will be circulated, you'll see that the ponding actually is in our backyard and extends well into the field. And this happens several times a year. So one of the other mitigating measures we were going to do this summer was extend all of our downspouts to the backyard. But now I'm not sure that's actually something that I should be doing because I believe this retaining wall is actually going to hinder the drainage of our yard. That's my biggest concern. I wrote some other things in that email which can be addressed separately, but that's our biggest concern is drainage of the yard. It does stay saturated along the back 20 feet until early summer currently. So I do know that the drawings that were submitted suggest the water currently flows west, but you'll see from the photo, it actually doesn't seem to. So those are our biggest concerns. If the retaining wall does happen to get approved to proceed, I do understand the high water table concern of the site. And if it does get approved, then I am asking, would the town consider connecting our downspouts to the storm line under Donville Street, since our part of Donville has yet to be upgraded from last year's renovation, to help with keeping the water out of our basements, because it's a yearly struggle. So I can go through the rest of the email, or if Mr. Patterson wants to respond to it through other channels. They're pretty simple comments to answer.
Okay, thanks, Tracy. And maybe give the applicant's agent a chance to, if he has any comments at this point, but I think we've heard your concerns. Certainly, this is a process. This is not the end of the process by any means, and certainly we're grateful of your contribution to the process so far. But I'll let Scott speak to this if he wishes, and otherwise, we've certainly got information on your concerns, and staff will carry that forward in the process.
Thank you.
Scott, did you want to speak to this?
Yes, through you, Mayor Lennox. What I can say is that I've received the written comments from Ms. Swift. And upon receipt of those, I forwarded them through to our civil engineering team. So they are aware of those. And I'm sure county staff, township staff will be looking at this issue as well through their review. But yes, definitely it's on our radar. It's something I flagged to our team. And we will be getting back to you directly or through township municipal staff about that issue and the retaining wall and basically just the water issue in your backyard. We don't want to see that get any worse than it is naturally in the long term. So it's something we'll be looking into for sure.
Thank you.
Okay. Do we have anyone else registered to speak?
No, other than the whites. Mr. Coffey, I know you're in the waiting room. If you're here to speak to the issue, I'm going to promote you to panelist and you can just accept. If you're not, that's fine. You can just stay as an attendee.
Okay. So we'll switch over to any questions or comments from council. Councilor Rankin, go ahead.
Yes, I was just wondering, what is going in the buffer area? It has a buffer area around the property?
Okay, just to clarify, you're
Yes, please.
wondering what's intended there in terms of plantings and that type of
Yes.
thing? Okay.
So through you, Chair, there is a buffer strip that will be required around the entirety of the site. So in the bylaw, it's a 1.5 meter in height buffering, which can either be fencing or a tree buffering. So maybe I'd defer back to Scott just to maybe clarify if it's will be trees or fencing or what sort of is in mind there.
Okay, go ahead, Scott, if you.
Yes, through you, Mayor Lennox. Thank you for the question. Through the site plan approval process, I think we're looking to or willing to look at any option. We were proposing or considering fencing around the perimeter of the property. But naturally through site plan approval for the cluster townhouse block, there will be discussions about landscaping and other items. But we're willing to look at anything really at this point, and we'll have those discussions with staff. If council would prefer to see one mechanism over another, I'd be happy to hear that at this time so we can include that going forward or consider it as part of the plan.
At this point, I was just interested to see what, if they had any plans for it at all. And if you could please, what is a common amenity area?
Yeah, so commonly through you, Chair, common amenity area is again a standard requirement in the R3 zone when anyone builds any kind of apartment or cluster townhouse development. There's an amenity area that can take, it's pretty flexible in terms of the form that it can take, whether it be a park or a parkette. You know, sometimes we'll see a grassed area with some landscaping, some benches, things like that. So again, it's based on the unit breakdown in terms of how much area is required. So as Mr. Patterson has mentioned, I believe it's 1,700 that they are proposing, which it does meet the bylaw based on the unit count that they have to date. But again, as Scott has mentioned, the details around what that might look like will be ironed out at the site plan stage.
May I?
Go ahead, Councilor Rankin.
I was just wondering if there's any possibility of it becoming an area for children. That's quite a dense area now, and you're going to have lots of family, and I'm sure with young children, if it's going to possibly be any place for them to play.
Yeah, so through you, Chair, I think Mr. Patterson, maybe that comment's addressed to yourself. So I would note that, and planning staff will definitely take that back and take it into consideration. Again, if council has any direction or ideas from that in terms of what that space might look like, or what the needs of the community are, that's exactly what this process is for. So yeah, we'll definitely take it.
Scott, did you wish to speak to that?
Yes, through you, Mayor Lennox. The common amenity area on site at this point is just shown as a rectangle on the plan. It will be programmed naturally through the site plan approval process, how it's landscaped, what's included in it, whether it's got play structures, things like that, swings, tot lot areas, whatever's required. It is part of the cluster townhouse block, so it'll actually be part of the condominium. That area will be subject to a condominium approval. So I want to make it clear at this point that I don't think it would be a public park per se. It would be owned and maintained by the condominium corporation as part of that. So it would typically be only available to those 20 cluster townhouse units. And the residents contained therein. So if they have children or anything like that, naturally they'd have full access to that common amenity area and be able to utilize that. Access to it for the other townhouse blocks or their other members of the public, that would be up to the condo block, how they restrict that or allow that, but it would be under private ownership.
Any other questions, comments from council? Councillor McCabe?
Thank you. And through you, Mayor Lennox, who is VED? If you don't mind me asking that.
VED are they're my clients.
Yep.
They're on the call here. They're just a group of, I think there's 5 partners involved in the project. They pooled their resources and bought the land, and they're looking forward to going or taking this through the process and getting the approvals. But yeah, they're a mixture of. There's Harry. Maybe he wants to speak to it. Do you want to introduce yourself, Harry, and who you are?
Yes, so my name is Harry. I'm part of Wade Homes. Me myself, I'm a structural engineer, been into development since many years, and delivered very well quality products out into the market. Have built very magnificent touches to the townships, and have been a very healthy member of every community where we have been. So WED stands for Versatile Evaluated Development. That's what we are planning to add the same feather into Arthur.
Thank you.
Another one, Councillor McCabe?
Is the reduction from 232 to the, I think it was 161, is that just to make more room for housing? In block 3, I think it is.
Through you, Mayor Lennox, it was a result of trying to put all the pieces together, to be honest. The end result for that particular block 3, and it's only applicable to block 3, where the lot area is down to that reduction. Yeah, it was simply to try and fit it in. It seemed to follow along with what Cachet had requested and be close to what they requested. But it was a result of putting all the pieces together and ending up with that particular block size, putting the townhouse block on it, and then seeing how it fit.
All right, thank you for that.
Go ahead.
What are the approximate square footage of all the townhomes and the condominiums? I might have missed that in the presentation, but.
No, it's again through you, Mr. Chair. The ground floor area is roughly 600 square feet plus garage, and then the upper floor is roughly 700 square feet. So I think the final square total is somewhere between 1,300 and 1,400 square feet for each of the units.
Alrighty, can I keep rolling?
Go ahead, Councillor McCabe.
All right, thanks. I know it's very early in the process, Scott, and thanks for your answers. What, with all the talk about attainable housing and everything like that, and the need for workers in our township to be able to afford houses that are in this area where they actually can work, because we're down a lot of employers are down a lot of employees. Is there, do you have a kind of a ballpark on pricing for the townhouses and condos? I know it's early, but just curious.
Yeah, through you, Mayor Lennox. Unfortunately, I do not. But because Harry introduced himself, maybe Harry has an idea of what the units may be worth or what their selling point would be.
This is very difficult question, but I'll try my best to answer this. We'll definitely follow the path of affordable housing plan. Our houses will definitely be very economical price for people to afford with the quality. But the pricing will totally depend upon the value, what is going on around into the market, but it will not be kind of something which is not digestible for my community, that is Arthur.
Got more, Councillor
Yeah,
McCabe?
just one more. Thank you, and thanks for your indulgence. The garage that's on or in every townhouse, it's a 1-lane driveway. Would that be fair to say? Yeah. Okay.
That's correct. Yeah.
All right. Thank you.
Any other questions from council? So I have one or two myself. I think block 3 is the one that generates the most interest from my perspective. I know that when Cache made their initial proposal to us, the concern was raised partly by me. And this winter is not indicative of what we typically get in Wellington North in terms of snow quantities. And with that very minimal front yard, I'm worried where snow may be stored on those properties. And of course, you're asking for a reduction in rear yard as well, so I'm not sure where we go with that. But just wondered if you'd given consideration to maybe a smaller number of differently configured units to give us some more front yard and rear yard, and particularly in block 3.
Thank you for the question. Yeah, it's really a design consideration. For me personally, as a planner, I try to give as much rear yard space typically as possible. So in this instance, block 3, the zoning requirement is a 7.6 meter rear yard. We've requested 7.5. I know on Cache, they've requested a rear yard setback reduction down to 6 meters. So if we were to look at something like that for that particular block, we could push the units back and increase the front yard setback and create more area in the front yard for snow and things like you suggested. It's really a balancing act of trying to create usable amenity area in the backyard and then accommodate parking and snow storage and things like you suggested in the front yard. I'm more than happy to discuss that further with staff and try to come up with a happy medium or see what we can do. But yeah, given on the context of what Cache did, that maybe we need to look at a reduced rear yard setback reduction for that particular block or something, just to kind of offset and create additional front yard area. But I'm happy to look at that. I think that's something we could do.
Yeah, and I guess part of my question was, I understand you have a particular layout in mind. Could the dimensions of the townhouse be changed with a smaller number of units in that block to make sure that we have some rear yard space for families with children to use, and also address this issue with the front yard access as well?
Yeah, and again, I believe that's something we can look at. I'm sure everyone's taking notes from the staff level, so I can work with staff on that to try and see what's viable for that particular block.
And then just one other question, and that's in general, and again relates to the same topic around the overall density of the project and making sure that we have adequate space to deal with things like snow storage. And we had, the resident raising the issue of drainage. Snow storage is also an issue around where's that snow going to melt to as well. So just want to make sure that those are carefully thought out. This sort of layout may work in an area with less snowfall, but may not work so well here. So any other questions, comments from council? Okay, and we don't have anyone that's come into the meeting late. All right, so I think that brings us to the end of our process for today and for the public meeting. Thanks everyone for your participation. And we'll move to adjourn the public meeting. So I have a recommendation here that the public meeting of February 21st, 2023 be adjourned at 8:05 p.m. Could I get a mover and a seconder for that? Moved by Councillor Burke, seconded by Councillor McCabe. All those in favor? It's carried. So we're adjourned from the public meeting. Switch back to our regular council meeting. And I have a recommendation here that the Council of the Corporation of the Township of Wellington North resume the February 21st, 2023 regular meeting of council at 8:06 PM. Can I get a mover and a seconder for that, please? Moved by Councillor Hearn, seconded by Councillor Rankin. All those in favor? That's carried. Thank you. We'll move on to adopting the minutes. So we have a recommendation here to the minutes of the regular meeting of council and the public meeting held on February 6th, 2023 be adopted as circulated. Can I get a mover and a seconder for that, please? Moved by Councillor McCabe, seconded by Councillor Burke. Any questions or comments on those minutes? All those in favor? That's carried. Thank you. We got business arising from the previous meeting, and that's a notice of motion from Councillor Burke. And I'll just read the recommendation here that the Council of the Corporation of the Township of Wellington North directs staff to undertake a cost benefit analysis on the current planning services provided to the township by the County of Wellington compared to having an in-house planner on staff. And I'm assuming you would like to move that, Councillor Burke? We have a seconder for that motion, Councillor Hearn. Thank you. And with that, I'll open the floor for discussion. Councillor Burke?
I'll go first. So I just wanted to bring this forward because I think it's important that we do a review of services from time to time. I understand and can appreciate the fact that the county has provided those services to us for a number of years. But as we continue to talk about growth around this table and into the future, I just think that it may be time for us to bring those services in-house if it's a viable option.
Okay. Any other questions, comments? I just have one, Councillor Burke, and that is the scope, the intent of your scope just to look at cost benefit, or is it go beyond in terms of evaluating the appropriateness of this?
I would suggest that if it looks like it's something that we could do in-house to help council come up with some kind of checks and balances, because we always struggle on some of the needs that the community wants us to deal with. So, I mean, if it's of a cost benefit, I think as we talk more about our growth management plan, that it's something that we should consider.
Did you?
Yeah, if I can
Councillor
weigh in.
McCabe?
Thank you, through you, Andy. Yeah, I'm certainly open to looking at that. I mean, there's no better planner than someone that actually works for the township, and perhaps maybe not from the County of Wellington. They'd have maybe a better understanding of literally where the land lies. So yeah, it should be an interesting cost comparison.
Any other discussion? Yeah, and I just have one more question, and this really provides some clarity for staff who are going to have to take this away. Do we have an expectation in terms of timing?
Well, I don't mean to be catty, but I'd like to have it. I'm still waiting for one of my notice of motions to come back to me. So, I mean, I can appreciate the fact that this is going to take some time. So I guess it can be set aside, but I don't want it to be forgotten about.
Steve?
Sorry, thank you. Thanks for that too, Sherry. Are you thinking like full-time or part-time or contract or?
Well,
Just to get my head around it.
I think it really depends, Councillor McCabe. I mean, is it something that we could cost share with? I mean, we've looked at other options of cost sharing with other staff and with our neighboring municipalities. So I don't know what the realm actually looks like. I just think it's important to me to have a look at it. So whether it's a part-time position, whether it's a full-time position, and maybe we can incorporate some other duties that maybe are being overlooked. or are on other people's plate, but is not their primary job. So I'm open to options. I just think that this, as we continue to talk about growth, and it's not going away anytime soon, that this could be an opportunity.
Any other questions or comments? I'm gonna put you on the spot, Brooke, and because I mean, staff are gonna be tasked with taking this away. If you maybe could comment on how we might go about carrying this out, and that would be great.
Thank you, Chair Lennox. So I would suggest that in order to look at the service levels provided around planning, we need to have a fairly certain idea of where we want to head in terms of planning. And one of the things that we do have on our work plan currently is an update to the growth management strategy. I would actually suggest that it might be a really nice complementary piece to look at the staffing related to the direction that is identified in that growth management strategy, because there's probably going to be different areas of focus this time around compared to last, just because there has been a change in context. There's been different financial pressures. We have more information on some of the infrastructure needed to support growth. So all of those different factors could have a real role to play in the type of staffing that we need. And I think that would be a really very good piece to add to the strategy itself, as kind of that implementation plan. And again, looking at how planning services are provided in the township in relation to the county and in relation to what we want to achieve over the next, several years. So I feel like that would be a nice fit. We are looking at doing the strategy probably towards, the summer fall period, just because we also want to accomplish our strategic plan first. So again, we want to know kind of the direction that the township would like to head before we make those kinds of recommendations around staffing. So if council agrees, I would definitely include that in terms of the scope of the project. And then we could report back with that as a recommendation.
If I may, I'm fine with going with that process, because I think that really is a good fit.
Any other questions or comments before we? Okay, we have a mover and a seconder, so all those in favor? That's carried. Thank you. So we'll move on to our items for consideration. So we probably should pull some of those out for some further discussion. Does anybody want to lead us off in that process? Councillor McCabe.
Review 2A. More specifically, the line Blacksmith shop.
Okay.
2C. Women's Day. 4A. Anyways, and 5B. Sorry, 2B. Sorry. With regards to all the tier. Awesome.
Okay. Anybody have any others?
I'm not sure. Sorry, Mayor. I'm not sure if it's part of it, but 1B, did Steve mention 1B?
No, the Aquatics Advisory Committee minutes.
Right, it sort of ties in with 4A.
Okay. Can do that one too.
And I'd like to pull 1C.
So that's the BI Mount Forest BIA.
Yes, thank you.
Okay. So just a quick recap here. We've got so far 1A, or sorry, not 1A, 1B, 1C, 2A, 2B, 2C, and 4A. Do we have any others that anybody would like to pull out for discussion?
Got all the ones on my list.
Okay, so we'll deal with all the others. And I have the recommendation here that all items listed under items for consideration on the February 21st, 2023 council agenda, with the exception of those items identified for separate discussion, be approved and the recommendations therein be adopted. Could I get a mover and a seconder for that, please? Moved by Councillor Burke, seconded by Councillor McCabe. All those in favor? That's carried. We'll go back up to 1B. So we have two recommendations coming out of 1B. We'll deal with them separately. Okay, so we'll start with the first one, which is just to receive the minutes. The recommendation is that the Council of the Corporation of the Township of Wellington North receive the minutes of the Mount Forest Aquatics Ad Hoc Advisory Committee meeting held on February 7th, 2023. Could I have a mover and a seconder for that, please? Moved by Councillor McCabe, seconded by Councillor Burke. Do we have any discussion specifically on receiving those minutes? Okay, all those in favor? That's carried. Thank you. We'll move on to the next recommendation. And that's that the Council of the Corporation of the Township of Wellington North approve in principle as recommended by the Mount Forest Aquatics Ad Hoc Advisory Committee, the work plan proposed for the Mount Forest Outdoor Pool and Aquatics Center presented in report Ops 2023-001. Could I get a mover and a seconder for that, please? Moved by Councillor Rankin, seconded by Councillor Burke. Discussion on that? Councillor Rankin?
Thank you, Mayor. I'm sure there's a lot of people looking forward to having a swimming pool in Mount Forest, including me. And I know that the Ad Hoc Aquatic Committee has been working hard towards that end. But I have a few reservations with the concept that is being offered. And has a costing being done to include a pool with a required number of lanes for competitive swimming? And has, for instance, a high school been included with discussions that could benefit the students? If there would be competitions held in Mount Forest with teams from outside the town, would they take advantage of our amenities and increase some business? Would some like our area well enough to relocate? At the public meeting the other year regarding the growth plan, Mayor Lennox said that the forecast that had been predicted for the number of expected residents in the near future will be superseded. It's possible that within those next few years, when the pool has been built, that new increased number will once again be more than what is expected. Will we have outgrown our needs for the pool in a few years? The Township of Wellington North does not have any pool that can accommodate competitions. Are we being short-sighted? So I'm wondering if the pool concept as it is now will be satisfactory. I wouldn't like to shortchange the residents of Wellington North. When completed, will we be asking ourselves if we should have or could have done more to comply with future needs? And I'm hoping not. So I would like to see more discussion before the final decisions are made on the concept. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other discussion? Councillor Burke?
I echo the rankings comments. Those are comments that I've made previously to council. I think the economic spin-off by having the 5 lanes to accommodate swim meets would be of a benefit. And I know that there were some discussions that that would be put if that's what the fundraising committee thought was appropriate, that those funds would need to be raised by that committee. And unfortunately, when this this proposal and timeline was presented to the aquatics committee, I thought there would be some satisfaction, and actually there was quite a bit of dissatisfaction. They believe they're not being heard. There's a lot of frustration, and you'll note in the package, in the minutes, that the committee has requested that council come to a meeting to hear their concerns. And that also relates to an item further down in the agenda that I believe that they should have been part of the discussion before that report was put in front of council.
Okay. Any other questions, comments? Okay. I'll call the motion then. All those in favor? That's carried. Thank you. We'll move on to 1C. This is in regard to the Mount Forest BIA meeting. And the recommendation is that the council of the corporation of the Township of Wellington North receive the minutes of the Mount Forest Business Improvement Area meeting held on February 14th, 2023. Can I get a mover and a seconder for that, please? Moved by Councillor Burke, seconded by Councillor Hearn. And with that, I'll open the floor for discussion. Councillor Burke, go ahead.
Just want to draw to council's attention, point number 4, the King and Main Street crosswalk. Myself and staff have taken quite a few questions with regards to why there was some oversight on that crosswalk, specifically when the BIA originally put it in front of council. And they also applied for a red grant, which they were not successful in getting funding to help with that crosswalk. So they just wanted to make sure that council was aware that they are very interested in seeing something done there. And I'll just leave it at that. We did let them know that it was still on the radar, but it was not part of the top 3, and they had a lot of questions with regards to that.
Okay, thank you. Any other discussion on that one? Okay, all those in favor? That's carried. Thank you. Move on to 2A. This is in regard to the red grant application. And we have a recommendation here that the council of the corporation of the Township of Wellington North receive report EDO 2023-004 Rural Economic Development or red grant application. Report EDO 2023-004 and further that council supports the application being submitted in partnership with the Lions Blacksmith Shop. Are you going to move and a seconder for that, please? Moved by Councillor Rankin, seconded by Councillor McCabe. And with that, I'll open the floor for discussion. Councillor McCabe, go ahead.
Thank you, Mayor Lennox, and through you. I think this would be a great application for sure. But I just wanted to run kind of some numbers, I guess, Dale. Say the upgrades were 200,000, they would only be able to get 30% of that 200,000. Is that, am I reading that right?
That's correct, Councillor McKay.
And then I know it says that you're not asking for funds from the council right now, but would this be a fundraising opportunity as well? Or what's your course of action on that?
Yeah, absolutely. Should the I guess a couple of things. Whether the application gets approved or not through the RED program, the Blacksmith Shop Committee have a significant amount of fundraising to do to make these improvements to the blacksmith shop so that they can reopen. So we're hoping that we can get at least 30% through the RED grant by submitting this application. And then Kate and the committee will have to then come forward with a fundraising plan around how they would fundraise for the rest.
All right, thank you for that. And I think was it the Ontario Artist Blacksmith Shop Association or Blacksmith Association that was pretty keen on the blacksmith shop, like doing demonstrations and stuff like that. That was, I know that's a couple of years ago, Dale, sorry.
Yeah, no, that's still on the table, and
Okay.
that sort of thing also supports the grant application and the reason why we'd like to get it open again and get it usable.
Great, thank you.
Councillor Rankin, go ahead.
Thank you, Mayor. I'm just wondering if we can only get 30% of the grant, would it be possible to use that money for partially for what they need just to be able to get it open, say the roof, for instance, rather than they mentioned the entranceways as well?
Yeah, through you, Mayor Lennox, I'm not really an expert in all the improvements that they have to make. I know we've got 4 projects in the application. I have a feeling, Councillor Rankin, that they're all important in terms of the entrance doors are important, making sure the loft is secure is important,
the lighting's important, and replacing the roof is also important. And it may in fact be to meet the building standards. All 4 of those projects may have to happen before we can open it up to the public again.
Any other questions or comments on this report? Okay, all those in favor? That's carried. Thank you. We move on to 2B. This is in regard to the community improvement program. And the recommendation is that the council of the corporation of the Township of Wellington North receive report EDO 2023-006 on the community improvement program. And further, that council approves the facade improvement grant of up to $1,300 to Blonde Design Company at 121 Main Street North in Mount Forest. And further, that council approves the tax increment equivalent for rehabilitation and redevelopment grant application from All Treat Farms in support of the upcoming expansion at 7963 Wellington Road 109 in Arthur. Can I get a mover and a seconder for that? Moved by Councillor McCabe, seconded by Councillor Hearn. And with that, I'll open the floor for discussion. Councillor McCabe.
Thank you, Mayor. Nice, through you. I know, Dale, I guess you're still available and on the hot seat a little bit. I know it's just, it says in the report that the amount won't be kind of known for a couple of years, but again, there's kind of a ballpark for this tier for the rehabilitation and redevelopment for all three. Is there some sort of a ballpark? Because I'd like to kind of know that before we approve it. I'd like to know that they have approved or we approve it. Sorry.
Yeah, through you, Mayor Lennox, I can give a little bit of insight into that. Yeah, as you said, until the construction is completed and impact do the reassessment, we really won't know for sure how much the tax bill will have increased. That being said, based on the estimated cost of the redevelopment, along with the previous tier grants the council has approved in the past, you'll recall we approved grants for both Young's Home Hardware and Armstrong Trucking in previous years. Both those redevelopments were somewhat similar to this one in terms of size, the new build. So realistically, I think we could expect the municipal portion of the tax bill to increase by upwards to $10,000 a year. So under our tax program, we would waive that increase for 3 years. So that would be upwards to $30,000. And again, to reflect back on the other 2 that have been approved under this program, pretty similar to what occurred for both those 2 redevelopments as well.
All right, thank you, Dale. Okay.
Yeah, go ahead.
I have just one more for you, Dale, while I've got you here. Can you kind of explain the breakdown of the county portion of this? I'm not really fully understanding it.
Yeah, no problem. Through you, Mayor Lennox. So what we're hoping is that the county have just recently come out with their CIP that includes the tax increment program as well. So this would be our first one where one of our local businesses might also be able to take advantage of the county program. And should council approve the CIP tonight, then we will submit an application for the county program. They calculate their tax rebate a little differently though. And they calculate it over 5 years instead of 3 years. So using the same $10,000 value, and it would probably be higher from a county perspective because the county tax is higher than the municipal portion of the tax. But if it was $10,000, then in year 1, they would waive 100% of that increase. So it'd be $10,000. In year 2, they would waive 80%. So it'd be $8,000 and then 60, 40, 20. Based on a $10,000 increase, if you do the math over the 5 years, it also equates to a $30,000 total savings to Altry. It's just calculated differently.
Right on. Okay, thank you very much for that.
Okay, and any other questions or comments on this one? Okay, all those in favor? That's carried. Thank you. We'll move on to 2C. This is in regard to the International Women's Day and Advancing Women Economically webinar series. So a recommendation here that the Council of the Corporation of the Township of Wellington North receive report EDO 2023-007, being an update on Saugeen Connect's International Women's Day and Advancing Women Economically webinar series. And further, the Council of the Corporation of the Township of Wellington North supports the 2023 Saugeen Connect strategic plan and areas of focus. Can I get a mover and a seconder for that, please? Moved by Councillor McCabe, seconded by Councillor Burke. And we'll open that up for discussion. Councillor McCabe.
Thank you for this again, Mayor Lennox. And yeah, I just wanted to do a shout out for this Women's Day that's on March 8th. And I think this is great program that the township is involved in, the other townships as well. And to have Dr. Kim Watson from Heartland on the as a panelist, I think she's very good at what she does up at Heartland and will be a great asset to the lunchtime webinars, and hopefully it fills up. And really just wanted to kind of a shout out to this. So wanted to make it give it recognition that it deserves.
Thanks. Any other comments, Councillor Hearn?
Yeah, Dale, I just wanted to ask, and I think we've likely spoken about this before, but how good of an uptake is there on the webinar series? And what are the kind of the outcomes?
Yeah, through you, Mayor Lennox. That's a great question, Councillor Hearn. This is our third year of running them. We capped the number of attendees at 25, and that's typically because the hosts of the webinar series like to keep the size of the group to about 25. We've sold out. When I say sold out, the webinars are free, but we've sold out in the past 2 years that we've ran them, so they've been fully subscribed. And we've been fortunate in Wellington North that in the first year we had 5 participants in this webinar series, and last year we had 4 participants. So we do have a number from Wellington North that participate. We have 2 that have already enrolled from Wellington North this year, which is awesome. And the first year group has actually kept going as kind of a community themselves. They've established their own kind of Facebook group, and they have continued to connect with each other over the past couple of years. And that's something that we really encourage as part of this program, is to develop that kind of mentorship amongst the group and as a network that they can rely on and count on as they proceed through their business career. So yeah, hopefully that continues, and hopefully we get a good turnout.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments? I would just add that, I look at the title Advancing Women Economically, and I think it really is too narrow of a title, because what we're talking about is advancing our community economically. Women make up over half the our population base. So if we advance women economically, we're going to advance our whole community economically. So I understand the reason for the title, but I do think it, the more we can empower our residents to do better, the better we all do together. Any other questions or comments? All those in favor? That's carried. Thank you. We'll move on to 4A. This is the ops report with regard to the Mount Forest Pool and Aquatics Center, and we have a recommendation here. And I think it wasn't all written in the cover sheets, but it's in the report. So I know that staff want to make a presentation on this before we get to that. So maybe I'll just ask staff to do that, and then we'll get the full recommendation out of that report. So I'll maybe turn it over to you, Brooke, initially.
Thank you, Mayor Lennox. I appreciate the opportunity to speak to this report. This is a joint report from Farhad Hussain, myself, and Matt Aston. And really, the intent of this report was just to provide some additional context for council. We noted the work plan for the Mount Forest Outdoor Pool and Aquatic Center, and there's several key decision points that need to be made by council in order to provide direction to staff on how to proceed. And the first decision point is actually coming up very shortly as part of the 2023 budget process. So the work plan was approved January 16th, 2023. And this report provided a revised schematic design as directed by council late last year in terms of the design that would provide sort of the baseline along with the foundation for an estimate, which was also provided in the updated report in January 16th. So that updated estimate was approximately $5.3 million. And then staff provided the key steps to work through this process more from a technical and decision-making standpoint. We know that the pool is a very hot topic in the community as well as on council, and we felt that it was important to develop some common understanding of how we would approach this process. So that's what the work plan was intended to do. I noted that there were several go, no-go decision points identified as part of that process. We also talked about the budget that had been approved to date for the design process of $576,000. To date, we've spent about $75,000 of that. And we have recommended that council make the first go, no-go decision as part of the 2023 budget process. This report was not intended to have council make those decisions today, but rather as part of the budget process. However, we understand that this is a difficult decision and there's a lot of work to do to balance both the desire and the needs of the community, along with the fiscal responsibility and sustainability of the organization. So we felt that maybe providing some thoughts on how council may want to approach this decision. This is completely up to you. However, what we've outlined in the report is basically 3 steps. So the first is that it would be very helpful for the township to identify an upset limit of the tax funded contribution in relation to other capital funding priorities for this project over the next 10 years. The second step would be to establish a fundraising target that includes all community contributions, as well as potential funding from other levels of governments, such as grants. And then the third would be agreement that the work plan timing would be contingent upon the successful achievement of certain financial milestones. So we wanted to highlight something that will be aligned in more detail as part of the budget process, but based on our current asset management plan, and there is an approximate cumulative capital budget requirement of about $195 million over the next 10 years. There are several large projects that have been anticipated. So this includes things like the Arthur Water Tower, a new water supply in Arthur, wastewater plant upgrade, a new operations center potentially, arena upgrades. We also have the Mount Forest Water Tower, wastewater plant upgrade, operations center, fire hall, arena upgrades, and pools. So as part of the 2023 budget process, a more detailed 10-year capital forecast will be provided for council to review. But what we found was that there is at this point about average spending requests of about $18 million per year. So the actual capacity for capital expenditures is approximately $10 million per year, which means essentially that we are underspending approximately $8 million per year. So that would be something that generally is referred to as the infrastructure gap. So as part of this go, no-go decision, we thought it would be helpful to provide a range of options that council could consider. And again, this is really for discussion purposes only. We are not recommending a particular option, but we wanted to provide the parameters at which some of these numbers would determine certain elements. So again, that question is really, what is the appropriate balance of township and community contributions? The 3 options that we've provided for discussion, option 1 looks at a fundraising target for the community of about $250,000. That would mean that there's a taxpayer contribution at today's figures, before we get into even looking at inflation, of about just over $5 million. We looked at sort of a mid-range option, option 2, which is a fundraising target for the community of about $1 million. That would leave a taxpayer contribution remaining of $4.3 million. And then option 3 looks at a more sort of equal contribution from both the community and the taxpayer. So $2.5 million fundraising target with a taxpayer contribution of 2.8. And what you can see is looking at the average tax bill per household, what those contributions would mean in real dollars today, and then what the tax levy or potential tax levy increase could be related to those contributions. So some of the considerations for the township upset limit is really what can the township afford to contribute to the pool? So if we look at this contribution as something that will be tax funded, the council could consider looking at a special levy to be included in the 2023 budget. And again, this could be spread out over 1 to 4 years, depending on what council wanted to see. We have used special levies in the past, at $250,000. Oh, sorry, there is a typo in there. There's an extra zero. My apologies. $250,000 township contribution for the hospital was made several years ago. That required a special levy of $14.88, which was over 4 years. So it was a 0.44% tax levy over 4 years. Staff is recommending that debt not be used at this time. Our staff have done an analysis of the debt capacity of the township, which is about $16.1 million. The existing debt that we have on the books is about $5.5 million, which means we have unused capacity of only $10.6 million. The second part of this question is the fundraising upset limit. So what can the community fundraise? Now, effective fundraising requires a target and a focus. A broader campaign is recommended to expand these efforts. Staff are not able to support a large-scale fundraising effort, and we do believe that this needs to be community-driven. However, of course, we're here to support what council wants to do on this matter. So one of the things to consider is that the larger the target, the more support is required. The council may wish the township to hire some external resources to assist with this. We could also consider the structure of the fundraising committee and how we approach those efforts. So depending on the target, that will have a large impact on the way we recommend we approach this. Further, the larger the target, the more time it could take to achieve the goal potentially. And this will impact the work plan and timing of future phases. So the other part of this is that we are recommending that the community fundraising target also include any grants that we receive from other levels of government. Again, we could focus our efforts on achieving some of those grants, which means that potentially we could lower the number that the community has to fundraise, but there did need to be concerted effort towards applying to those grants as well. So lastly, we wanted to talk about the idea of a contingent work plan. The contingent work plan would look at holding off on project tender, which is essentially phase 5 of the work plan that was presented to council, in that it would only be initiated once certain funding milestones were achieved. So that would include approving a financial strategy from the township's perspective for the township contribution. That would be looking at all the ways we could finance that. And also the fundraising target, making sure that it's been achieved, and that would include the grant funding if we're successful. This would result in a flexible project schedule. So there are additional go, no-go decisions along the way, but this allows us to make progress while still balancing all those important considerations that we've identified and making sure that we're working towards something that the community really wants, but in a very financially feasible and sustainable manner. We would also continue to review the 10-year capital forecasts and review of priorities. So we have to keep that in mind as well. We know what we know at this state, but that can change as we further develop those capital forecasts and work plans for each year. So next steps, this information has really been shared with council to provide some additional background and context for the upcoming budget deliberations. As part of the budget, a clear direction around the township's financial contribution and fundraising target are required for staff to move forward. We really need this information in order to develop those work plans and implement the work plan as it has been provided. Once direction has been received, staff can build out all of the implementation work plan and provide additional recommendations to address both the proposed financing and fundraising strategies. So that does conclude my presentation, but happy to answer any questions, and both Matt and Farhad are also on the line today if you have any questions for them. Thanks so much.
Okay, so we'll deal with the recommendation here, the recommendation, council of the corporation of the Township of Wellington North received report Ops 2023-008. Being a report on the proposed Mountport Outdoor Pool and Aquatic Center. And further, the council directs staff to bring the project back to council for consideration and decision as part of the 2023 budget discussion. And further, the council endorses the staff recommendation that debt is not a viable primary funding option for the pool. They can move in a second for that. Moved by Councilor Rankin, seconded by Councilor Hearn. With that, I'll open the floor for discussion.
Yeah, and excuse me, and through you, I guess this is probably for Brooke. If we hired outside people to do the fundraising, it's my understanding that they kind of take a percentage of the cost that they raise, so that number could very well vary, I guess I should say, depending on what we set the ad hoc committee target to and what actually comes in. Is that right?
Through you, Mayor Lennox, that is correct. There are different fundraising options and firms that provide those services depending on what we need to do or what we'd like them to do. Some provide more advisory services in terms of how to structure a campaign and go about using community members to implement that campaign. Some will do the whole campaign for you. My experience in the past has been that there's sort of a combination of both a fixed fee, which could sometimes range, between $20,000-$40,000, depending on what you want, to more of a commission-based fee, which can be upwards of 30%, which means that if you're trying to raise $1 million, you really have to raise $1 million, $1.3 million to reach that target. But again, we need to know kind of what the scale of the fundraising is in order to make the best decisions around the kind of external support that we may want to enlist.
Thank you.
Other questions, comments? Councilor Burke?
So I'd just like to say that again, I think that it's really important if some of the council members can come to our next meeting, to the next aquatics meeting. There's been a lot of discussion about not being able to really fundraise the way that they would like to, because we don't have, and it keeps coming back to, we don't have a finalized concept. We don't have a finalized price, and you can't sell a car or a pool without somebody seeing what you're selling. So we are really struggling to fundraise more than we have been. We've got some really good ideas. We talked again about some really good ideas, but there's some hesitation because when you go out to ask somebody to sponsor something, they want to know what they're sponsoring. And I also think that it would be a good time to maybe present what Brooke has presented here tonight to the committee as well, because quite frankly, when I first read this and I had somebody call me on this, they were pretty upset that we were going to make a decision tonight as to what the committee's target was going to be without any discussion at committee level. So I'm glad to see that we're not deciding that this evening. And it does lay out the numbers and some more of the context to have some better discussion. But again, yeah, our meeting is March the 14th. And if that presentation could be a part of the agenda, I think that would be very helpful. And if we could move forward steps as well, because we don't know how much we can raise until we go out there and try.
Any other questions or comments? Councilor Hearn?
Getting back to the fundraising, I think there are a couple of things going on here. There's the community fundraising, and then there's grants. And I'm just wondering, like, I know that staff does a good job of looking for grants. I'm wondering if we should explore the idea, and I've brought this up before, but something on as large a scale as this, explore looking at a grant writer, someone that is skilled at flipping grants and massaging the language to try to get the desired result. Is that something that's been looked at?
Go ahead.
Through you, Mayor Lennox, to Councillor Hearn. That is certainly an option that we can consider. And again, depending on what the fundraising target is, we can be very proactive in looking for grants. And if it's a really large grant, sometimes there is a big benefit to hiring a professional grant writer. It can be quite costly. So you need to make sure that it's worth the investment in that grant. Sometimes it may cost an additional $10,000 or $20,000 to apply for the grant, depending on what you're asking for. Now, that said, we would be happy to work with the fundraising committee, both staff in partnership with the committee to look for those grants and resource them appropriately based on, what the opportunity is. So again, that's part of the conversation and why those upset limits are really important for staff to understand, because that will really detail how much we can assist and leverage some of the efforts of the community members who are working on our behalf.
Councilor Burke.
My question is to Brooke, through you, Mayor Lennox. And is it too early to start looking and applying for some of those grants now? That was a question that was asked at committee level, if we shouldn't be starting to apply for some of those grants now, knowing that we do have a timeline and to see if we could leverage some of those grants now.
Through you, Mayor Lennox. The importance of the township's contribution is part of that discussion, because a lot of those grants will ask what the township is contributing and what the timelines are. So again, we would want to have that understanding as staff so we could provide that information. And sometimes those grant applications require council approval as well. So again, very helpful for us to have a sense of what's been approved as part of our budget for this project, because then we can share that information freely. We don't have to make that decision potentially on a very quick basis. It's just common knowledge. That's what we're working from. And then we can speak to that when it's part of the application process. So I think the sooner we can determine these limits in terms of financing, the better for all of the different processes that we're going to need to use to achieve them.
Thank you, Brooke.
Any other questions or comments? So I would just add too that this report lays out some fairly daunting numbers, scenarios, and difficult priority setting decisions that council is going to have to make, and some of them sooner rather than later, in order to move this project forward. So I think this is a really important point in terms of identifying what the taxpayer funded contribution may be, and of course, when with that, how that it will come about. I mean, these are big numbers, and I just want to underline that this is a major decision. I think of many. If you look at the numbers proposed in the 10-year capital budget, we have some difficult decisions ahead to be able to finance some of these things going forward. So just wanted to underline that fact. We're going to get into budget discussions here very shortly, and we're going to have to very carefully weigh what we have to do and what their priorities will have to be, and that's going to directly impact this project. Any other questions or comments? Okay, I'll call the motion. All those in favor? That's carried. Thank you. That brings us to the end of our items for discussion. Any notice of motion this evening? Seeing any? So move on to community group meeting program report. Does anybody have anything they'd like to report on this evening? Councilor Rankin.
Thank you, Mayor. I would just like to mention the cultural roundtable. We have had I think a very enthusiastic last meeting with our trying to get the goals that were set in the cultural plan moving forward. And it was our first meeting with our new chair, Bonnie McDougall, and it was very successful.
Councillor McCabe?
Yeah, thank you. And through you, Mayor, 2 weeks ago, I guess it was, had the community garden meeting at Claire Stewart, and then they are actually having another meeting tonight. Obviously we can't attend because we're here. But yeah, they're looking to see if more counselors can just come in for an information session just to see the progress on that. Excuse me, last Thursday had our Saginaw Valley Conservation Authority meeting, which went well. And then Friday, all day, I attended my first Roma meeting down in Toronto. So there's some presentations that we went through there that opened my eyes to a lot of things that they are actually doing that I might not have known before. And looking forward to sharing those presentations with our council and all the, well, most of all the municipalities in Zone 2. So great group of people down there though as well, and they have rural Ontario's best interests in mind, and that's what I was hoping for. So
certainly, I think we would look forward to hearing how we can support those initiatives too, Councillor McCabe. Anybody else have anything they'd like to report on this evening? Okay, Lisa, sorry.
I always have something to report on. Arthur BIA, we had a very, very nice discussion about plans for the year and potential art project and the gathering area. Actually a long discussion about garbage cans. Doesn't sound super interesting, but we had some that were placed under warranty that our staff here at the township didn't really think were user friendly. So it's like we're gonna get user friendly garbage cans. That's good. Mount Forest Chamber, some discussions around the path forward for the their Mount Forest guidebook, and perhaps making more of it online. But I don't know where they're going to go with that, but it's a discussion point right now. Arthur Chamber has conversation hearts all over town, so take a look at those. And both the Arthur Chamber and the BIA have had some discussions kind of together and apart about July 1st and festivities going on in conjunction with the Optimists down in Arthur. And I have a GRC meeting Friday.
Thank you. Anybody else have anything they'd like to report on? Okay. Brings us to bylaws. We just have 3 of them to deal with this evening. We have a recommendation here that bylaw number 13-23, 14-23, and 15-23 be read a first, second, and third time and enacted. Could I get a mover and a seconder for that, please? Moved by Councillor McCabe, seconded by Councillor Burke. Any discussion on those bylaws? Councillor McCabe?
sorry, just one quick question with regards to 013.23. Who is that numbered company? I don't know if I saw that or I maybe overlooked that. Yeah, it's 12548-713 is the.
I'm not sure.
Dale's got it. Dale, go ahead.
Yeah, Mayor Lennox, through you, that's the Century Doors Corporation.
Okay, thank you, Dale.
Any other questions on those bylaws? All those in favor? That's carried. Thank you. We're on to cultural moment, and Councillor Rankin has graciously agreed to share it with us this evening.
Thank you, Mayor. The cultural moment for February the 21st celebrates Anita Stewart. On her shoulders is an exhibit on display at the Mount Forest Museum and Archives that showcases some of the unique women in the history of Mount Forest. Today's cultural moment celebrates Anita Stewart, 1947 to 2020. Anita Stewart was a hero, not because of one single heroic act, but because of a lifetime of devotion and courage towards her passion to shed a spotlight on Canadian cuisine. When most Canadians were building a nation through politics, sports, or education, Anita knew that food had to be at the heart of every home, every region, and every country. Through her thoughtful activism and her patient disruptions to the norm, Anita changed the food industry in Canada and how Canadians eat. In 1959, at 12 years of age, Anita moved to Mount Forest with her mother, Anne. Anita's father, Cliff, had died a few years before, and Anne needed to find a new life for herself and her daughter. In her mother's kitchen during those lean years, Anita discovered how to cook simply, cheaply, but also deliciously. Her active high school years in Mount Forest unveiled the dynamo to come. Anita went on to finish her BA in child psychology, her MA in gastronomy from Australia, and raised 4 sons, all of whom work in the Canadian food scene. As a prolific cookbook author, Anita's writing educated the world about what we grow, forage, fish, and raise. She went even further by connecting and nourishing the people who contribute to the food industry through agriculture, tourism, fishing, and of course, the chefs. She traveled from sea to sea to sea by dog sled and boat to discover the diversity and beauty of Canadian cuisine. Anita's efforts were rewarded by being the first food laureate at the University of Guelph, by becoming a member of the Order of Canada in 2012, and most recently by the successful adoption of her vision for a National Canada Food Day. This bill, sponsored by MP John Nader and passed unanimously in 2022, formally establishes Food Day in Canada on the Saturday before the first Monday in August. Our local hero, Anita, died before knowing that her vision was complete, and she is buried in Mount Forest beside her hero, her mother, Anne. Submitted by all the volunteers at the Mount Forest Museum and Archives who mounted the exhibit On Her Shoulders, Unique Women in the History of Mount Forest.
Well, thanks for that, Councillor Rankin. And with that, we just have a closed meeting session left on our agenda. So we'll a recommendation here that the Council of the Corporation of the Township of Wellington North go into a meeting at 9:02 p.m. that is closed to the public under subsection 239(2) of the Municipal Act 2001, specifically to deal with personal matters about an identifiable individual, including municipal or local board employees. Can I get a mover and a seconder for that, please? Moved by Councillor Burke, seconded by Councillor McCabe. All those in favor? That's carried. Thank you. We're in closed session.
Good night. Great being here.